I did want to acknowledge our little program committee that put this together. It was really Charles Watkinson from Purdue University Press, who essentially called on the telephone one day and said, I have this great idea. And so he wondered whether SSP and ARL could put this together, and he had been talking, as he had mentioned this morning, or when he spoke this morning, to Barb Wilcox, who is at the NIST National Institute of Science and Technology, who unfortunately can't be with us today, which we drew heavily on her experience with her government colleagues, and then Rebecca Kennison, who, where'd you go, Rebecca? Right there, to help us out in terms of thinking of panelists to provide us what we hope was a broad perspective of the partnering opportunities and issues that are out there for all the different kinds of organizations that are represented here today. And I was actually very delighted to find out what a broad set of individuals and what vast experience we have. And so I hope that there's a way, and we'll be looking at this in terms of continuing this kind of conversation that we're having. We structured the day in terms of looking sort of generally in terms of what's happening, move to editorial roles, and then into production issues and roles and activities. And our last program area is that of marketing and outreach, which we think was an important aspect to any of the items or workflows or any piece of whatever anybody is doing. And so we've got 3 different perspectives here in terms of how we can partner to do some kinds of outreach of these works that are the results of scholar activity. Our first speaker is Monica McCormack from New York University. For those of you who don't know Monica, she will describe her particular position there, which I think is kind of an interesting one.
I really appreciate the opportunity to be here today, so thanks to Julia and Charles and Rebecca for making this possible. I need an odd duck on my slide as well, because I am one of those people. I'm going to mostly be describing today I'll be addressing marketing and outreach in a sort of broad sense from the context of a collaboration that we are in the early stages of building at NYU. And in some ways, my role there embodies that collaboration. So I'll talk a little bit about the context we have at NYU, give you a couple of examples of how our collaboration has started out, how that's led me to start thinking about metadata in some new ways, including metadata as a form of marketing, and then describe some ways that we're looking to develop digital publishing services that will draw from both our press and from our library in different ways. So the NYU context. As most of you probably know, NYU is a huge private university. We have more than 40,000 students in 18 different schools and colleges, a lot of professional schools, large, complicated, difficult to sort of rope in and understand your way around. So it's a really interesting and complicated context for the kinds of work we're trying to do. The library at NYU is a large research library. It's in some ways a fairly new large research library. NYU didn't become a really significant player in research universities until probably the 70s. So we don't have the kinds of, centuries-old collection that some of the Ivy Leagues and the large public universities do. But we're a very aggressive player in the library world in terms of building our collection. We have a really healthy collections budget. And I work most closely there with the Digital Library Technology Services Group, who have been mostly spending energy on not so much on digitizing text as on preservation projects, working on grants that are about preservation of audio and video formats, which are really important for our institution and for our collections. And that's been an education for them in thinking about how to work with text. The press at NYU is a middle-sized university press. We publish about 100 books a year and no journals. Our revenues are about $5 million a year, and fortunately we are not in any danger of going under or being closed. But there is a real interest, as we heard this morning, in really thinking about how the press can more effectively mirror or work with the large mission of our university and the service orientation of our library. as most presses have to do, as we heard this morning, we're really focused at NYU on the fields that we're good in, that we already publish in, and that only represents about 10 different scholarly disciplines and lots of overlap between them in humanities and social sciences. And so when you look at the enormous comprehensive university that we're in, our press certainly does not effectively mirror the nature of the university. So the press also reports to the dean of the library. We are not we in the press and we in the, I say we about both. I'm kind of schizophrenic in that way. So if it gets confusing, forgive me. It's confusing for me too. The press reports to the library, but is not a unit of the library in the way that the press at Michigan now is or at Utah State is. The press has its own budget and is required to cover its own costs with a small amount of subsidy, which is never quite certain from one year to the next. We have a good relationship with the provost, but it's not something we can guarantee. So one of the long-term goals that the dean of the library has had is trying to bring the press sort of more closely into the service mission of the library and think about different ways to do that. And so my role in the Digital Scholarly Publishing Office was created, my position was created as a link between the two organizations. So I report both to the Dean of the Library and to the Director of the Press, and am really charged with working within both organizations and building connections across them. So helping the library think about how to develop publishing services, helping the press think strategically about how to evolve from being a print book publisher to a publisher of scholarship sort of regardless of format, and that's going to be a very long-term evolution because we still need our business model to pay all our bills and keep my colleagues and myself employed. And then the third piece is what really mostly I'm going to be talking about today is where we can collaborate across the two units and how we can work together to draw from expertise on both sides. And a little bit about my own personal background. I was an editor at the University of California Press for many years, and then as I started seeing the business model for our monographs appear to be challenged, shall we say, I thought it was really interesting to me how libraries were starting to embrace the digital and had some room and some resources to begin to experiment with digital scholarship. And so I decided to leave my perfectly good job in publishing and go to library school. So I got a library degree with the hope that I would both be acculturated and educated into the ways that libraries work, but also would emerge into a world in which publishers and libraries were realizing that they needed the combined skill sets and that there would start to be jobs for someone like me. And fortunately for me, NYU developed such a job. So I was very, very happy about that. Now I'm going to describe a couple of just examples of how we've begun the collaborations at NYU between the press and the library and how those have led us to start thinking about how we can build beyond projects to some more systematic kinds of services. So the first example I have is a project that really came in the way that book publishing projects often do. It started as a book with one of the editors at the press. She was, Debbie Gershenowitz, was working with two lawyers who were representing a group of other lawyers. About 200 of them had written text to describe what it was like to represent detainees at the Guantanamo Bay Detention Center. And so they were writing a book that represented and analyzed and described the issues and concerns about that work in Guantanamo. And they wanted to not only to have the book, but also to preserve and provide access to all the full text of those documents that about 200 different lawyers had written. So they wanted a digital collection as a component of their book, and the press wasn't normally in a position to do this, but having just arrived on the scene, this seemed to me like a useful first project that we could undertake that was a fairly contained thing that our digital library team could help us with, about 200 documents. They weren't too long, they were PDFs, it wasn't anything too wildly innovative. It also emerged that the authors had not only these 200 texts, but also a wide variety of other archival materials that they also wanted preserved. So it then evolved into yet another project, which is a more standard library project, that there's now a big collection on Guantanamo in our special collections, which was a very exciting thing to sort of start with this one relationship with the authors, and it evolved into something, because we had this connection between the two institutions, that we now have a lot of different kinds of products. So this is the website that we created, and some of the stuff that's in the lawyer's larger archival collection is going to be ultimately also appear in this digital collection. But basically, we got what I think is a win-win-win. We have happy authors, and one of them is an NYU faculty member, so we're all happy to have happy faculty members. The press has a more interesting book that's enhanced by this digital content, and that the digital content can help provide some exposure to the book that we might not get in other ways. And we have this new special collection, which is really an exciting and important one, and we're being able to raise some funds to process it. So that's been really important. For me, however, I think the biggest thing we got was experience, that my colleagues in the library and my colleagues at the press, except at the very top levels, didn't know one another. They didn't really know anything about what they did, what was important to either of them. So for me, it was the beginning of I'm not the only one who's the bridge between the organizations. Now I have colleagues who are beginning to work together, and that's been really critical for me, and I think for the organizations as a whole. So one of the things I think that we learned from this experience was really standard project management kinds of things. You know, the ways I would go about this when I do it again are somewhat different, to really get clear from the outset what everybody's expectations and goals are. It started to reveal the things that the press assumes and the things that the library assumes, and how those need to be explicated and discussed before we can really work together effectively. So one of the things, you know, we'll have memoranda of understanding when we provide this kind of project going down into the future, not only for us, but also for the partners outside the library and the press, our authors and their colleagues who are working with us on it. So clarifying goals up front, I think, is going to be really important. But in terms of marketing, which is the purported topic of our panel today, I think one of the things that really struck me was that the ways we thought about how to use metadata were really, really different. From the press's point of view, the idea of having a website that was sort of in conjunction with our book was really about getting exposure, was really about how do you get the word out so that people start to find our book. And we built links back and forth between the digital book site and the digital document site. So for us, the press was really about discovery from search engines from the web. That's the metadata we were interested in, was really about bringing attention to the book and to the collection. For the library, there was a lot more focus on the sort of the metadata within the collection itself, how it was going to be used to support searching and browsing, and what kinds of keywords we needed, and how we had to train the students and authors who were providing the documents to give us the metadata that we needed to really make the collection rich and useful. So we all had to sort of learn about the metadata that the other side thought was important, and I was kind of in the middle trying to translate to both sides, and that was really informative. And for me, it started me thinking about ways that metadata really sort of makes these projects go. Whether we're talking about print or E, metadata is really the sort of critical issue for making things discoverable in a variety of ways. So the next projects that we're working on, this one is, again, a fairly sort of conventional. Lots of university press and library collaborations begin with this kind of thing, where the press is giving digital copies of our backlist books to the library to preserve, and we'll select a certain number of those, maybe as many as 100, to make available in an open access repository. The Digital Library Technologies Group had not worked with text much, as I said before I arrived. We haven't been a library that did a lot of scanning of our collection. So this is an education for our digital library team in thinking about how to present books and how to build search tools and connect that digital collection into our library catalog, and that's been really educational for all of us as well. The press at the same time is going to be selling all these books. Some of them are print on demand, and we'll be using our usual channels and hoping to learn a lot about what it means to make books available in open access and how that's going to affect our print sales for them. The pieces of metadata that I think have become really important for this are things that one side knew about and the other side didn't. So for all the books that the press publishes, we have a vendor to help us develop good ONIX, which is the metadata standard for books to be sold. So we send our ONIX to Amazon and to Barnes & Noble, and it's the sort of the metadata tool that really greases the commercial wheels. It lets us describe our books in a variety of ways that are useful for people who want to buy them. So we can put in blurbs, and we can put in reviews, and we can, the pricing and the page limits, and lots of things that sort of go beyond what a MARC record would tell you. So the press is going to be providing Onyx for all these collections and making it easier for the books to be made available both in print and electronic versions in online marketplaces. And the library, of course, is going to be enriching the MARC records that already exist for the print books to make sure that the e-versions are visible both in our catalog and in WorldCat. And finally, of course, we're going to have to work carefully together on metadata for the website for the open access to make sure that it's visible from search engines. So in all these ways, the metadata is working as a sort of marketing and outreach tool, whether it's explicitly for marketing in marketplaces like Amazon or other online booksellers, or for selling ebooks, for making our books visible in library catalogs, including WorldCat, which goes way beyond our own local one, and also just on the web in general. So for us, I think the metadata as marketing has been, it's a term that I've been using, and I'm not sure that it jives very well with my library colleagues. They don't really think about visibility and discoverability as marketing. I mean, I think they think that's a little crass. So I have to be careful in my terminology, but for me, marketing is not a dirty word. It's, I think publishers very naturally, and my background is I've been a publisher a lot longer than I've been a librarian, really think about, making your work visible is the thing that's utterly essential to publishing at all. So we all have we have to keep our vocabulary flexible about this, but I'm learning to use other words with my colleagues: visibility, discoverability, things like that. So all of these experiences that we've just been beginning have sort of helped me start thinking more broadly, and I'm stealing liberally from some other colleagues here. I mean, I wish I had the Scholarly Publishing Office or Rebecca's shop or the e-scholarship group at the California Digital Library, like some of my colleagues in the room, but we're really operating with two distinct units that don't know a lot about each other, and so I'm trying to think about how do we draw on what we actually do have, and so thinking about how we can provide publishing services without me needing to hire a staff, which doesn't appear to be in the cards quite yet. So how can the press help the library? How can the library help the press? And think about publishing options for both sides. So one thing I've been thinking about, and I've been sort of mulling this over for a while now, even before I got this job, was how can libraries support some of their digital publishing operations, perhaps by selling some of their content. This idea came to me originally when I was in graduate school at the University of North Carolina, where they have a wonderful set of digital collections called Documenting the American South. Which began with the digitization of slave narratives, which were being heavily used in their library collection, were starting to fall apart. So they decided they were really popular, they'd make them available online. But the way they've made all this material, and it's gone way beyond the slave narratives now, all the material is really web only. It's HTML, and it's nice, rich HTML, but it's still kind of just HTML. And we got a lot of requests for those. People wanted to buy the books, and there was virtually no way that this digital project could provide copies of the books, and that would have been useful, and it would have been a nice little income stream. So that gave me the notion that digital library projects could think about outcomes that would enable them to sell if that became of interest. And I know that both Cornell and Michigan, you've done an awful lot of scanning of their collections over the years, make those books that are not in copyright available through Amazon and other print on demand, and that's been really valuable. And they can use that revenue and feed it back into their collections budget. So one of the things that the publishers can provide in this kind of relationship is, at our library, we don't have a lot of expertise with digital text, but the press can provide information and vendor relationships for print on demand, and for the creation of EPUB from our PDFs. We have a vendor for doing that, and I think that kind of service would be really useful since we don't have a large in-house sort of digitization shop. The other experience that we're having from the press end is beginning to think about how we can more effectively sell our books as ebooks to libraries. And I'm sure most of you know that book publishers, especially the scholarly book publishers, have been very slow to this game. One of the exciting things that's happened now is our press and three others, Temple, Penn, and Rutgers University Press, got a grant from Mellon to investigate how we can collaborate on selling ebooks to libraries. So that we're hoping that we'll develop a business of a multitude of university presses, maybe as many as 50, that can provide large subject-based collections to libraries. And as part of that grant, we did a lot of research and got a lot of information from libraries about what they needed. And the metadata angle there was especially compelling to me, that in order for these books to really work in the library setting, libraries, as I'm saying here, this brief history, I mean, we heard some of it this morning, libraries don't sell directly very much at all anymore to libraries. Book publishers work through intermediaries, through eBury or NetLibrary, or for print books through YBP. So the publishers don't really understand what the libraries need and how the material appears in their work, in their own, the library's catalog, how their users actually get at it. So for us, with this ebook project, it's been really important to understand how providing really rich MARC records, or having a vendor who can help us provide really rich MARC records, including a lot of content from the books, will make it much easier for people to find and use, and hence buy these books, whether it's through patron-driven demand or just through the fact that they're being heavily used. It's going to be important for this product, if we consider it really a product, to be discovered in the library catalog, and the metadata is going to be really critical to that. So we can learn from our local colleagues as well as others and vendors what we need to do to enable that. So we've also been getting a lot of approaches at NYU, both on the press side and on the library side, for people on our campus who want publishing services of various kinds, and often it's a combination of digital and print. So I've been trying to think about how can we meet these needs with the resources that we have already. So in our digital repository, and we're using open journal systems for publishing some journals. And so what the library side can offer is these kinds of digital platforms and the software that enables publishing workflows, and that I think is going to be really useful. The library can offer its own particular kind of metadata expertise and a lot of advice and guidance on how to make things, how library indexing and abstracting services work, and the kinds of things that often local publishers just don't really understand. So how to make things visible in the library world is an important thing that the libraries can offer in that way. What the presses can offer, I think, and some of this I've really liberally stolen from the collaboration between the UC Press and the California Digital Library and what they're calling UC Pubs, UC Publishing Services, is really services that the press already has that we can easily scale up. So some of this is very straightforward, guidance about how to set up a peer-reviewed process, which a lot of new publishers don't have. But also services to register for ISBN, for Library of Congress cataloging and publication data, registering copyrights, and then the vendor relationships that we have with print on demand, with a warehouse, with a digital asset management vendor who can convert things to EPUB for us. Those relationships, at least at NYU, take many months of negotiation and passing through the legal counsel's office, and even just getting a contract signed is really useful. So the idea that we have one central place that already has those relationships in our campus, if people want print publications out of their digital content, the press can enable that for them, as well as ultimately possibly doing sales and distribution. And we're still thinking about whether we do this as a fee for service, whether there are explicit costs, how we could attach a price to that. So those are the kinds of services that we're beginning to think about. And I see that I have reached my time, so I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Monica. Our next speaker is a stand-in, and we are delighted. Again, Barbara Silcox, who was to speak here, who is program manager at the National Institute of Standards and Technology, was going to talk about the working at the lab and how they support researchers. But fortunately, Susan Makar has been able to be convinced to come in and give Barbara's presentation. So I'm delighted, and thank you very much for filling in, Susan.
Thank you, Julia. Little did I know when I walked in the room this morning that I'd be presenting this afternoon, so that was a bit of a shock. I guess when I didn't see Barbara, I knew I was in trouble. but I'm happy to be here, and Barbara very much regrets not being able to be here, but I'll do my best to fill in for her. I'll be talking about how we've used some strategies to enhance the discoverability of NIST publications and how we've collaborated with NIST scientists in doing this. And a little bit of background about the National Institute of Standards and Technology, or NIST. We're an agency of the Department of Commerce. We have about a staff of about 3,000. And that's about 2,700 staff members on the Gaithersburg campus, which is about 20 miles outside of where we're at right now. And we also have about 300 staff members out in Boulder. And you're probably familiar with the atomic clock, and that's on the Boulder campus is where you'll find the atomic clock. We serve, even though there's 3,000 staff members, we serve about 1,500 scientists. And outside of the permanent staff, we also have about 1,800 scientists, guest researchers from other institutions that come to NIST, and they come throughout the year. And in a typical year, there's about 1,800 scientists that visit NIST. The Information Services Office is where Barbara and I work. Barbara is, as Julia said, she's the program manager. She's actually the program manager for electronic information and publications. And I am one of her staff members, one of about 10 people. And what's interesting about the Information Services Office is that we're not just a library. Even though the scientists at NIST typically think of ISO as the library, we have 3 different programs. We have the Research Library Program, the Electronic Information and Publications Program, and the Museum Program. So this makes it a very interesting place to work, and I actually have my hands in all 3 programs. For example, I used to work in the library program. I am a librarian. I was moved to Electronic Publications, and I work on the NIST the NIST Virtual Library website. And then I also help maintain the museum website. So, and then also there's a lot of this is an example of how much cross teamwork there is between the programs, and that really is emphasized or within ISO, the teamwork across the different programs. This is the knowledge continuum that we work with. This is ISO's operational framework. It illustrates the various stages in the research and publishing cycle. And ISO has products and services mapped to this framework, and this provides a holistic approach that makes sure that we have the skills and resources to meet the needs of our researchers. And this was actually developed by a former library director, Paul Fasalo. NIST publishers, NIST researchers author about 2,000 technical publications each year, and about 85% of those publications appear in peer-reviewed research or in conference proceedings. About 10% are technical papers that are published as agency publications. These are publications that actually come out directly from the agency. And they include technical reports, handbooks, special publications, and also the Journal of Research of the National Institute of Standards and Technology. And all these technical papers are reviewed internally for technical requirements, policy, and editorial quality. A little bit about the Journal of Research. It's the flagship publication of the agency. It's been published under various titles and in various formats since 1904. And that's a pretty long history. NIST came into being back in 1901 as the National Bureau of Standards, and you may be familiar with the Bureau of Standards. The name changed in about 1989 to NIST, or the National Institute of Standards and Technology. And the Journal of Research serves as a major vehicle for NIST scientists to report their research in metrology and related areas. It was first published in 1995, and it continues to be published in print and electronic format. And we continue to put articles as PDF files online, making it available. Our goal is to go back to 1904. We plan to put the PDF files, full text files, into our digital archive, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. The technical reports of NIST offer a variety of ways for NIST researchers to disseminate their research results. And there's many of the technical publications are published in digital format only, and then some of the technical publications have high visibility and some don't. An example of a publication with high visibility is the Handbook of Mathematical Functions, and this happens to be the most highly cited publication that NIST has, and it is a technical publication. It's not published as a journal article or a conference proceeding. It comes directly out of NIST. Our technical publications are sent to GPO and NTIS, and they're cataloged in WorldCat, but discovery through these channels really isn't sufficient. The publishing services of ISO, we provide knowledge management and administrative support to the NIST Washington Editorial Review Board, or what we call WERB. We also publish the Journal of Research. We publish the official NIST histories, and this is a 3-volume set going back to 1901, and I think right now it goes through 1979, where someone is probably working on a more recent history, but it is a 3-volume set that we offer online through our NIST virtual library. We also liaison to the U.S. Government Printing Office, GPO, and NTIS, National Technical Information Service. We do citation and impact analysis, and we identify and evaluate publishing venues for our scientists that request this type of service. And we also have recently been doing consultation on metadata creation. As we started to think about creating a new service model, and this came about when we conducted a survey of NIST researcher publishing practices and needs back in 2008. And this survey assessed how NIST researchers select publishing venues and barriers to publishing. Also perceptions, their perceptions of the Journal of Research, and awareness and perceptions of open access journals. And what the results of the survey revealed was there were a number of opportunities for ISO to tailor its publishing services and also focus on working more closely collaborating with NIST researchers. So we came up with some strategies for enhancing discovery. And I'll be talking in more detail about each of these strategies, but in summary, we wanted to try repurposing NIST technical reports in the Journal of Research. And these were some of the technical reports that may not have been getting the visibility that they deserved. We also did a pilot study of adding references and links in Wikipedia to Journal of Research papers. And also, as part of enhancing discoverability of NIST publications, we're building and working on a NIST digital archive. And I'll talk more about that in a bit. So in repurposing technical reports, we conducted a pilot study in 2010, just this last year, to determine if repurposing NIST technical publications or reports as papers in Journal of Research would give NIST technical report literature greater visibility. So what we did is we identified technical reports, or technical notes, which is a NIST series, publication series, and intra-agency reports, or IRs for short. We identified several of these published in the last 3 years, and they were determined that we could perhaps republish these in the Journal of Research. So that was what we did. Volume 115, issues 1 through 6 is the 2010 volume for the Journal of Research. So some of the selection criteria that went into picking out which reports to republish included topic, archival value, data publication, publication length. It didn't matter how long the article really was, and that can be an issue when you're publishing in commercial publications. So we were looking at these different criteria, and then ISO lab liaisons collaborated with the Journal of Research's Board of Editors in helping identify and selecting what technical reports to republish. And the lab liaison program that we have at NIST is our outreach program. It's the way we help market our services to the scientists, library services, publishing services, the museum program, and so forth. So we were finding a nice opportunity to collaborate with the scientists on this project. So some of the outcomes and impacts of repurposing technical reports, it created new and revitalized interest in the Journal of Research as a viable publishing venue for scientists, NIST scientists. It also created opportunities for collaboration between the lab liaisons and the NIST researchers, and we're always looking for opportunities to collaborate with our customers, the NIST scientists. And one of the things that we did see was that the download rates did indicate that interest in technical reports is comparable to the journal's regular papers. And this is demonstrated in this graph here, where it's tracking the number of downloads for the repurposed paper compared to the other papers in the same issue of the journal. So there are four articles in this issue. One was a repurposed article. I'm not sure if you can tell the color, but the repurposed article is the purple line. And even though it wasn't at the top, it didn't have the most downloads, it didn't have the least downloads either. So it was comparable to the other papers in the Journal of Research, which were full-fledged papers. The next project that we worked on as far as enhancing discoverability was a Wikipedia project. This was also conducted in 2010, and it was to determine if embedding links to NIST-authored papers within a heavily used web resource translated into greater visibility for NIST works. And the resource that we used was Wikipedia. So we identified 28 papers, Journal of Research papers, published between 2000 and 2009. And we searched Wikipedia for the existence of a topic page for each paper. So, and then when we found potential topic pages, we wanted to make sure that they were accurate, that they didn't have flags like you sometimes see with Wikipedia articles. So we wanted to make sure that they had accuracy and authority, the pages that we selected. We selected finally, the final set was 11 papers. We ruled out about 17 papers that we didn't feel like were a good fit for linking in Wikipedia. And so what we did is we linked those papers to further reading sections on topic pages within Wikipedia. Then we started to track the downloads and citing patterns before and after the links were added to Wikipedia. So what we found is that the downloads before and after we were tracking, we determined that it was around November 30th, 2009 is when we started tracking the downloads. And although it's hard to see, the increase in the rate of downloads did actually increase after we made the links, created the links. In some cases it's not dramatic, and in other cases it is rather dramatic. For example, and on the left-hand side, or on the right-hand side, those terms reference articles that the topic of the article was weights or thermodynamics, biophotonics. So we're looking at 8 articles here, and the article on little g actually increased quite a bit after it was linked in Wikipedia. Also, the nanoelectro article seemed to have a fairly dramatic increase in the number of downloads. It really varied, but we could see some differences, and we actually determined the rate of change in our final report. Another means of enhancing discoverability is our creation and work with our NIST Digital Archive. And we have not launched the archive yet, and we hope to launch it fairly soon in the next few months. But what we're doing with our archive right now is we are, as I mentioned, we have a museum program. So this is a perfect opportunity to create a collection of images within this archive. So you can actually see images of calorimeters, refractometers, weights and measures. And so it's a very nice way to display what NIST has done over in a historical sense. We're also using the archive to deposit full-text Journal of Research articles. And so right now we go back to 1996 with PDF files of full-text JRES, Journal of Research articles, and it's going to be current through 2011 when we launch it. So those are the two collections that we're focusing on right now, but we do plan to add more agency publications like technical reports that really you're not going to find in other places. They're unique to NIST. And so that will be the next focus. And of course, we'll be adding more digital objects from the museum, the images of our digital objects. The oral histories, the NIST oral histories will be also added eventually. So we have oral and audio files to add. So we are looking forward to working more with our digital archive and launching it for the public, everybody to see it. So as we implement the new service model, we want to be able to communicate our results of the pilot projects to the NIST research community. And we have several means of doing this through our Lab Liaison program and our New Center blog that we have. We also want to be able to communicate the value of ISO, what we bring to the collaboration process. And this is in the way of how we can evaluate the information resources and assess outcomes and impacts. And then as we move forward, we want to be able to expand on our pilot projects. We want to add more links to Wikipedia beyond Journal of Research. We can add all sorts of things to Wikipedia referencing our museum collection. We have virtual exhibits that we can link to. We have objects that we can link to, images of objects. So, and even more different publications beyond the Journal of Research, more NIST agency publications. And then we want to be able to collaborate more with the NIST researchers early in their writing process so that they can consider other venues that will give their research more visibility and help us further enhance the discoverability of NIST publications. Thank you.
Thanks very much for, I would never have known it wasn't a presentation prepared by you. You did a great job. Thank you. Okay. Oh, look who's up. Charles is our last speaker today, and he will probably tell you what he's going to talk about. Right?
Thank you. Well, thank you very much indeed. I've got the graveyard shift, so if you fall asleep during this, I really don't mind. You won't. So just to quickly give you some context and then try and address this issue of marketing that we've thought about. And I just found Susan and Barbara's presentation fascinating, these sort of guerrilla tactics, the Wikipedia links. Just a side note, at the Ithaca meeting recently, the head of Oxford University Press academic publishing was saying how they had at least one or two people devoted to adding links to Grove reference online in Wikipedia, and they found that very effective. So just to give some context, and I've got rather sort of text-heavy slides. I'm just going to point out sort of a few key aspects on many of them. Purdue University in the middle of a cornfield. The thing I want to note here is strengths in science, technology, agriculture, and engineering, a land-grant college. I then want to talk a little bit about the press, and I want to point you first to the item at the bottom of this list, Purdue University Press, strengths in Jewish studies, philosophy, and comparative literature. So the question mark there is to say, if we're talking about alignment, Purdue University Press is not aligned with its host institution, and I don't think we're atypical in this way. And so one of my particular tasks in many ways, coming to the press in late 2009, was to think about this issue of alignment and how we might make the press more aligned with its institution. And as Rick Clement said this morning, that's kind of essential for a small university press in particular if it is going to survive. And you can see that we are a small university press with 4.5 staff, one very small person, and we're classified by AAUP as a Group 1 press, so under 1.5 million. And I think this is interesting. You'll find that the strategies and fortunes of university presses are tending to diverge based on their size at the moment. At University of Michigan throws a spanner into those works. The larger presses may be going towards a more commercial model, the smaller presses going to their libraries. University of Michigan Press, of course, is not really the smallest, and yet it's going to the libraries, so I may be completely wrong, but it is an interesting thing to watch. So I'm here with my colleague Mark Newton. We go out together, as we say. We are going around together a lot, and it's been a fascinating and exciting collaboration. Mark's the digital collections librarian, a professor of library science, and he runs this system, Purdue ePubs, which is based on digital commons. And you can see, again, we don't have much staffing to devote to this. In many ways, we're a little bit more, even though we're an ARL library, we're a bit more like a liberal arts college in many ways, in terms of the staffing we bring to the table. It's a pretty successful repository. So I wanted to say how really useful this slide has been to us. And this is a slide that was shown to us by J.G. Bankier, who's here, the CEO of Berkeley Electronic Press, Digital Commons. It's a slide that's really helped Mark and myself conceptualize how we link to each other. I as a director of the University Press and Mark as the head of ePubs. And I've borderized this a bit. It was originally looking at scholarly communication needs in the digital, or scholarly communication items in the digital repository. I've broadened it out a bit and maybe stretched it too far. But what you see is this continuum of all hell breaking loose, in Maria Bond's term. You know, post-1993, you had this explosion of different types of electronic communication that faculty wanted to create, and not just faculty, but staff and students on a campus. And there's this kind of charge to bring this back into the fold, bring it back together. So as University of Michigan Press in 1930 was founded to do that, centralize it, and now we have this challenge as well, to bring this back into standards of durability, citability, stability, you know, all those good things. And so what you see here is red and blue stars. So looking at this as a sort of this continuum of things that faculty want to do, you can see that up at the top right, you have these much more formal sorts of publications that we're used to university presses doing, books and journal articles and things like that. And then down below that, there's a whole realm of, in the middle, sort of other sorts of things. And you go right down to the sort of administrative documents, the less scholarly materials down at the bottom left. So you can see that the red stars, these are areas where Purdue University Press has kind of interests, and in many cases there are also areas where the Purdue ePubs might have a claim, and in many cases both of us are interested. So, for example, you can see that you might have a symposium happening. So the symposium might well be captured in Purdue EPUBs, and then the press might be interested in taking some selected papers out of that and making a formal edited book out of it. So we have this continuum, and it helps us negotiate what we can do, what we can provide, and where we have particular skills. So just to do a quick rundown of where we are now. So we're doing some journals together, mounted on Purdue EPUBs, run through the press. We've got about 10. And we're trying to find ways of sustaining these. The library is providing the infrastructure for free. We then need to make sure that as a press charged with covering our costs, we don't lose any money on these things. So the model that seems to work for us is to charge money back for copy editing and typesetting and a little bit of other stuff, you know, adding to abstracting and indexing services and a little bit of marketing, some leaflets, things like that. And we're thinking that's about $5,000 a year for a two-issue a year journal, about 6 articles in each issue, and that's all copy edited and typeset. And then we're insisting that the journal has a graduate research assistant, a GRA, dedicated to running it, so that people don't, the professor who started it doesn't get bored and forget about it. They've always got a graduate student working away doing the boring stuff. And we're facilitated hugely by the etiquette, by the workflow that BE Press has built into Digital Commons to make this whole peer review and so on process easy. Some backlist books, a lot of presses are doing this. Supplementary data, this is nothing like what Rebecca is doing, this is nothing like what Maria is doing, this is very modest. This is just little tiny links to very small data sets just to add value to our books. So here's a book on demolition, it links to some spreadsheets which people can download from the EPUB site. And the spreadsheets are printed in the book, but people might want to fill them in, so they can download them there. So we're not really here. And you would have noticed back on a slide a bit further back, Mark and I work on EPUBs. There is an e-data repository side to what Purdue University does, but we're not really that involved in that. That's run currently as a separate kind of thing. So going forward, we want to do more of those things. We want to expand to particularly look at technical reports, which seems to be a rich area, and it's very interesting to hear NIST's work in this area and other government agencies. It would be nice to know how much it costs to do a technical report and things like that. More of these conferences, workshops, we don't do much of this. Georgia Tech has done a lot of work of interesting sorts in hosting conferences. We'd like to learn from them. We're going to be challenged to broaden our range to people who are not necessarily on campus. I mean, places, societies, small societies especially, just linked peripherally to Purdue, and we're going to have to deal with the issues that they have in terms of needing to restrict access sometimes for sustainability reasons. And the press does have some expertise. We run 5 subscription-based journals, but completely outside EPUBs. We run them as print journals with electronic on Project Muse. And then new model publications, I could disappear into this, but Habry Central is a sort of a part online publishing platform, part bibliographical tool, part hub community, which we're developing on the area of pets and people, the human-animal bond, which is one of our strengths at the press. So the aim here is to link them, all more and more interlinked. So visualize the continuum, visualize little arrows going between them. There are technical challenges there, but I think, as I'm going to suggest in a moment, there are also some marketing issues and other things to think about. So just to go back to the marketing theme of this section. So when publishers think about marketing, of course, we're thinking about 3 or more different audiences, but the key audiences are definitely maybe at the top almost in some ways, the authors and potential authors. And that's why we do conference displays. I mean, we never make money at a conference display, we break even, but we do get some good exposure and good author submissions, hopefully. Users and potential users, as I think Monica mentioned, we're so intermediated from the libraries that we barely see them anymore. So this is really talking about driving traffic from end users who will then be coming to us through resellers, and then the administration, the shareholders. I mean, these people are important to us, especially in the university press world. So, what benefits does a collaboration with the library bring to the press? So we are integrated into libraries. We're a unit of the library, but we still have a slightly different business model with slightly, we identify ourselves as a university press. So the main benefits is that we really, we can offer more and wider services to our authors. And that's really a way of starting to build up again our alignment, starting to get out of, maybe maintain some of our legacy lists, but starting to think more about being part of the university's signature areas. And we can start to generate conversations around those areas, as I'll show in a second. And we're getting benefit from being part of a collegial group of information professionals who are getting out there, meeting with faculty. These faculty liaison librarians are vital to us. And we're getting good usage data out of the repository. The benefits to the libraries are also there. You know, this whole question of what the situation with repositories used to be, where Mark told me to get rid of the term roach motel because I was misusing it. I didn't really understand Dorothea Sale's full meaning in it. I'd always visualized this place where there are only roaches living, but I know that's not actually what it means. But anyhow, the point is that they were kind of empty, and we're helping populate them, and we're helping to make them high visibility, driving usage. And it is easier to talk about open access and the things that libraries care about if you're talking in the frame of publishing rather than mandating, because publishing is linked to prestige, mandating sounds like more extra work. So I think when Mark and I go out to different colleges, different leadership groups, we're having a different sort of conversation. And hopefully we're bringing this is in the context of new roles, we're helping faculty liaison librarians become more collaborative with the faculty, bringing them into new types of discussion, which are going to be so key as we go forward with data issues and understanding disciplinary difference around data. Okay, so we're doing some good work, I think, in marketing to authors and potential authors. You remember the thing at the top of our list of what publishers do in marketing. We're doing quite well in marketing to administrators. We're raising our profile on campus. Hopefully the press won't be dissolved. We're trying to make ourselves indispensable. But we're not really seeing much yet in the way of how this collaborative relationship can really benefit the marketing to users. So what does the library bring to the table? What does the press bring to the table? How can we really improve what we're doing there? And here we have this sort of translational thing going on. There was this earlier discussion about outreach and discoverability equals marketing. So here's the pub speak versus live speak. And here we both have a common idea, which is that it's a really good idea to build distinctive collections at the moment. And it's a good idea if you're a press, it's absolutely key, it's core to build distinctive lists. So not to have lots of orphaned books, but core areas of strength. So here's a case where we feel that we can build a strong collection, a strong list in a field that is actually relevant to Purdue. And this is engineering education, where Purdue is #1 in the country with a whole bunch of newly hired faculty and a real interest. And this is visualize a line going from top to bottom here, which is an arrow. So this is kind of a progression over time, more or less, of how this list building is developing for us in engineering education. So what happened is we had an open access journal out there, which we started in 2006, and we were kind of surprised by how successful it was. So it's on problem-based learning. It drew in a number of faculty from Purdue as editors, and it's about this technique of experiential learning, which is very, very heavily used in engineering. So it was drawing together some of the engineering education people into our sort of realm, and we were starting to talk to them. And they were seeing success in what we were doing, because as an open access journal, it was fulfilling many of their goals. It was getting across to practitioner readers, lots of teachers, lots of people in other out of university contexts. It was exposing this interdisciplinary methodology across many different disciplines, and it was generating great usage in the developing world, and Purdue puts global in everything now, and so that was nice to be able to feed back to the university. I know that's in all university mission statements at the moment. So it was doing well, and it continues to do well, and it continues to ascend. And these are nice things to talk to engineering education people about because they like to see success. And we were able, with the use of Google Analytics, to show this international usage I was talking about. So Indonesia is the second highest user of this. And we're also able to show impact in the state. And of course, as a public university, state government is a crucial stakeholder for us. So here we go. I mean, now we have an on-ramp. We're able to start building a list in this area. And we're thinking of this as a list, a collection area in the repository as well as in the press. So we've started 2 other open access journals, which are going live actually next year. We're starting to do books in this area. And Mark's working on technical report series and workshops and symposia, so really focusing in, building a list, building a collection. And that feels like an area of marketing collaboration at a slightly higher level of thinking about marketing that kind of makes sense to collaborate on. And it fits very much into what Monica was talking about in terms of the Guantanamo Bay lawyers, but with an idea of multiple books and multiple products rather than such a specific area. But I think Monica's very much thinking in the same way, which is encouraging because I admire what's going on there. So, okay, I mean, being a little bit provocative perhaps here, the new university press list, well, I don't know, but here's the idea that from books and faculty journals, the conventional fare, we're able, working with the repository, to make links and create a sort of community, whatever you call it, with the libraries, which matches with what faculty want at the moment. We're not disconnected. We are allowed to be more connected, more providing services that they actually need and want, rather than straitjacketing them into books or straitjacketing them into journals. And this is something, I think this is the most important thing that this work, being a unit of the libraries, brings to us. And all these things can be promoted through these nice tools the university press has, the subject catalogues, when we go to a disciplinary conference, where we do social media stuff with Facebook and Twitter and all that sort of stuff. So all those other good things, we can promote usage of all this material, and everything reinforces each other. Everything reinforces another thing. I don't know how to express that, but you have this reinforcing activity going on. Challenges, quite a lot. One of our big concerns, one of my big concerns, is that I'm undermining, what we're doing is undermining what it is to be a university press. So we're at risk of undermining the brand. For example, should we brand the Purdue Journal of Undergraduate Research as a Purdue University Press product? It's a very difficult one. Maybe we need to more explicitly separate our services off, even if behind the scenes we're doing the same work. We've got common production services, but maybe we need to do white label, the white label generic refrigerator versus the GE branded refrigerator, produced by the same people, but they have different connotations in branding. Positioning, libraries like to say yes, presses have this culture of saying no, and if we're building lists, we have to be able to say no to some projects, so that's going to be an issue. And then these other things are not strictly marketing, but you all know that these are problematic. The culture of the libraries is to give stuff for free, and it's very hard. There aren't usually price lists for how much things cost. So how do we itemize costs, and when do we decide to charge, and when do we decide it's part of the library's mission to provide stuff? And this is going to become more and more of an issue, clearly, for all of us. And then the staffing levels and skills. We covered that so many times today. From the question of how did Cindy Clark build editorial skills at it was Cindy, wasn't it? But how at NIH through all sorts of things, from Julia's survey of business, what are the skills librarians need to be building? All of these are big questions. So I need to make my last plug for this, which Julia kindly set up at the start. We are doing this workshop, and Mark's going to wave it, but I have one in my pocket. It's just which pocket. So we're going to be doing, with Georgia Tech and University of Utah, Alison is here from Utah, we're going to be working on this. We're going to be doing some research activities to look into what we need to do in library publishing services, maybe to take it to the next step. In smaller institutions as well as larger institutions, where you have a university press, where you don't have a university press. We're doing a web survey at the moment. We are going to be doing a literature review. We're going to be doing some case studies done by Rain Crow, looking at e-journals, looking at conference proceedings, looking at book-like publications, and then we're going to be bringing together some workshops. And I do encourage you, if you have activity going on campus, or even starting to think about it, perhaps to look at this, take away this card, and think of applying for one of the workshops. We're going to hold 3 workshops in May, and we're going to try and invite a range of sample of different institutions to come. So if we don't invite you, it's not personal, it's just that we have limited money to do this. But I hope you'll go to this link, fill in the survey, and we will promise at least to share everything we learn with you if you do that, and send you updates. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Charles, and thank you all for hanging with us for the day. We've still got some time on our schedule for any questions that anybody might have for our panelists. So, is there anybody here who has? Yes.
For the woman from NIST, I'm Alvin Hutchinson from the Smithsonian. When you edited Wikipedia pages, subject pages, did anyone suggest doing this by an individual's pages? I imagine there are some NIST researchers who have their own pages or pages about them.
The question has to do with whether or not we were suggested to go to individual pages to make entries. Is that correct?
That's right, yeah.
That didn't come up. What we decided to do was to look for topic pages, and that seemed to be, well, the way we came about even discovering this was that we did a search. I was looking at downloads of papers in the Journal of Research, and I noticed that this one paper was very it had a lot of downloads. So then I discovered that it was actually in Wikipedia. And so then the idea was, oh, okay, is this the reason why this article got cited so often? Because the other articles weren't really, downloaded, I should say, not cited. They're 2 different things. So that gave us the idea of actually looking for topic pages versus individual pages. And so no one really, we haven't done that, but that's certainly something that we could collaborate with our researchers on, to say that if they have entries in Wikipedia, whether it's on their research or on what the work they do, that they might actually cite or add to further reading materials the Journal of Research or any other publications that they think are worth adding to Wikipedia or linking to Wikipedia. Does that answer your question?
Other questions? Yes.
David Levy, Cornell Library. This is for Monica, Charles, or any other involved in library press operating. I guess I'm curious what you think. I mean, if your prognosis for the future of these relationships is positive, I kind of assume you feel that way. How much is that related to this reporting structure of the press reporting into the library? So if, as was said earlier, 80% of the university presses don't report to the library, is that the first step that should happen, or are there other possible ways of relating?
I think that a lot depends on the local situation. I mean, in our situation, one of the strategic moves they made was to make the position that I'm in is in the library budget. So my time doesn't cost the press anything, and they don't have to recover the expense of me. So me being a strategic sort of partner with them is just useful. And I think that's going to be helpful for letting the press have the freedom to think and the actual bandwidth. I mean, my time is useful to them in a way that doesn't cost them anything, and I think that helps. When I was listening to Maria talk, I love the idea of having a whole bunch of different units together and having the problem she's having of trying to reorganize how they work together. I mean, I'm the one body trying to link all these groups together, and that's a very different way of going about it. So I think it really depends a lot on the organization. At a place like NYU where we're really just starting, it makes sense to me to start this way. And I think it's really important that we have the library dean kind of as our main ally because she gets publishing. There are some library deans who don't, and I wouldn't want the press to be, in some situations it's not an ideal, wouldn't be an ideal collaboration. So I think it depends a lot on the place and the interests of the people involved.
I would absolutely agree with Monica. Maria will stop me if I'm wrong, but I believe there's an article coming out by Clifford Lynch in the Journal of Electronic Publishing. Where is? Oh, she's gone. So that's I think that's coming this month. I've seen a preprint of that, and his analysis is very interesting, which is he sees a huge resurgence in the number of new presses coming. He suggests that there are going to be lots and lots of institutionally focused university presses on the horizon, very small, with 50% of their funding at least from institutional subsidy. And at the same time, he sees this fission in the existing presses between the larger ones, who are really turning into commercial academic publishers and going that direction, and the smaller ones who are going towards being engulfed and being hugged by the libraries, and focusing more on their institutions. But it is very situational. Rick Clement at the start referred to this kind of continuum from reporting to the libraries to being integrated into the libraries. And reporting relationships themselves can be of many different sorts. What's happened at Purdue is we've been truly integrated. There's a real attempt to truly integrate us, and that means more and more of our functions that are not core are being insourced into other library departments. And the dean is constantly looking for other ways, other places that can happen to really slim us down to just having having a strong editorial core and maybe some marketing in our core as well. But everything non-core is being put into other parts of the libraries. And that's certainly a very different approach. Another aspect here is how much trouble the university press was in before. If the press really wasn't in a lot of trouble, was making quite a lot of money still, and had a lot of infrastructure to protect, I think whatever reporting structure you have, you're going to have a bit of tension. In the case of Purdue, we were running into the ground. We didn't have infrastructure to protect. We were just happy to be rescued. So there are lots of different contextual things and situations here, not just reporting structure.
I have one little addition, which is that my press wasn't running into the ground, what I'm seeing is that there's a real interest in protecting the meaning of the press imprint. That's taken us a long time to build. It's important for the quality of the work that we can publish. And so just anything from the university coming on under our imprint is not likely to happen, at least not anytime soon. So I think that, being really integrated and being the service publisher for your university is not the situation that I'm in at NYU, and I think that also is going to vary across places. Our imprint is really, the branding is really important for certain kinds of presses.
Well, absolutely, and when did you last think, I must get Purdue's the press, that's where I'm going to get the book from? Whereas NYU, in certain subjects you went, NYU, I'm going to get that book. So I think that's absolutely the case, absolutely the case.
Any other questions for our panelists? How about any other questions for other panelists throughout the day? Okay. Well, just to let you know, we are, as we said earlier, we're videotaping this. We will be sending it out. You'll all get an announcement about what channels it's on. Pretty much going to be on an ARL channel, probably a Columbia channel, maybe SSP. We're not quite sure where it will appear, so that you can share pieces of it with your colleagues. We'll try to get all the presentations up as well. And if we can find a way to keep this community having conversations, we'll be happy to do that. If you want to contact either Charles or me about doing that, don't hesitate to ask. So I thank you for your attention today, and have safe travel home.